So could we focus back on the concepts of growth and the graceful transition?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Responding to your question about digging within and what we're actually doing within our faith traditions, I wanted just to share briefly what we're doing in India, because I think not only does it give an idea of what we're doing in India, but perhaps it also can give a vision of what, without the financial leaders and without the political leaders sitting here, what as faith leaders we can do. In India right now, in the last couple of decades, there's been a movement toward growth and development, of course, which is positive in a vacuum. The problem is that we don't live in a vacuum, and when you put that movement toward growth and development into reality, you take it out of the vacuum, what you end up with is widespread deforestation, widespread paving over of dirt, and I think it was you who spoke about the heating of the atmosphere due to paving everything over. And that's really due, in some very, very tragic sense, to an ideal that says we will be developed when, we will be considered a first world country when we no longer have forests and dirt, but rather we have concrete. We no longer have small little shops, but we have big shopping malls. The idea of shopping malls as a vision of development is one that's held actually quite dearly in India, and people talk with great pride about the large shopping malls coming in and the number of shopping malls that their village has. And what our organization is doing is working to bring in what we call green visions of development that don't say we're anti-progress, we're anti-development, we want you to live without electricity, we want you to starve, but that say, might there be a vision of development that's able to bring in economic growth, that's able to bring in development that doesn't require us to pave over natural ground, that doesn't require us to deforest the forests. And that's really the work that we're doing. And, you know, the floods that took place last year, in which tens of thousands of people died, of course, were a horrendous tragedy. The silver lining in it has been that it's really caused a lot of people to look at it and say, what's gone wrong? And what went wrong was encroachment, development in that vacuum. And so now we're able to come in and we're able to say, okay, can we bring in organic farming? Can we bring in reforestation? Can we bring in midday fruit programs? We're doing a lot of tree plantations in the schools and a lot of educational programs that talk about their traditional culture, that it's not that somehow if something comes wrapped in plastic from a shopping mall, it's inherently better than something that comes not wrapped in plastic from your local shop, because that's the social movement that's going on. And we all know from an economic model that demand drives supply. Mm-hmm. So we can sit here and we can shout at the economists or the developers for what they're doing, but if there weren't a demand for it, if there weren't people prepared to buy into it, it wouldn't function for very long, at least in India, in the realm in which I'm speaking. And so to help people understand, that's not a model.
So what models can we bring to the table? Go ahead, Fred.
Well, the key is to recognize that we are the problem, and it's not the politicians, and it's not the economists, because until we can zero out our carbon debt, we are contributing to the problem. And so the problem must be understood first as interior to human nature and not exterior. As long as we think it's exterior, we can blame others. But as long as we blame others, we inhibit our ability to fully participate in the solution. And that means there is a journey of divestment. And that divestment is not necessarily monetary, but it's everything that we do that participates in the consumer society. It's everything that we do that fosters expanded transportation options. It's everything that we do that takes more than we need. And so we've got to reduce those greeds back to essential needs. And until we do that, we're part of the problem. And so we're talking about a lifestyle change. We're talking about a radical shift in what is understood as the good life. And we have to emphasize qualities over quantities. We have to emphasize those religious traditions that look to the spiritual life for fulfillment, and to do that here in this world so that thy will be done on earth as it is there. And then that begins to answer the question of how we shall live.
So I agree very much with what you're saying. One practical change that I think is going to be very important for human society to transition to a more sustainable future is the training of emerging clergy to teach green based on their own faith tradition. The religious traditions are most of the major religions are many thousands of years old, and they have many thousands of years of teachings. We're dealing with a very, in many ways, a very new crisis of the past century, even the past several decades, and we're being called upon to make a significant shift in the way that that religious institutions educate their next generation of leadership. For example, I think it's very important for every seminary, every religious school, every madrasa to have a weekly teaching on faith and ecology. And not only that their imams and swamis and priests and rabbis should be delivering these teachings, but there should actually be scientists who are focusing on ecological issues, who are teaching in the seminaries, giving the general overview of each of the issues that we're dealing with. So a weekly, 1 week it's on biodiversity, the next week it's on climate change, etc. And that if we were to make those transitions in the tens of thousands of seminaries around the world, that's educating the educators, which would then reach tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people.
Excellent.
I'd like to jump back with Alan, because for a strategy, our biggest problem is that people want to have what they have and keep what they have and want more. And as a strategy, Alan pointed out just seeing the damage we're doing seeing how we're killing ourselves, really, pointing that out, that you may want more and more and more, but you're growing the cancer and we're physically killing ourselves with creation rather than making creation the way it should be. So I see, using science, using faith groups to, granted, I'd love to do politics and economists, but I mean getting people one by one to see the damage they're doing to themselves. And I think that's, at least in my faith tradition, something we've been pounding into people, that it is on an individual basis what you're doing to yourself and how you're relating to others and creation is the damage. And so I would see as a strategy, using the facts and using the information, how coal dust is killing you and how using all this plastic is killing you and vinyl, the knowledge of that and, on a ground level basis.